Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be talking about Cyberforce once again with Cyberforce number 0. And I know some of you might be thinking, Bo, I think that book is out of order. I promise it's not, and I'll explain once we zoom in and take a closer look. First published in September of 1992, we can see here on the cover, we've got Heatwave, Stryker, and Psyblade featured. It's a good looking cover. And what I meant by it not being out of order, I have in fact finished the entire Cyberforce miniseries, but Mark Silvestri did the same thing with Cyberforce that Jim Lee did with both Wildcats and Gen 13, where they released the miniseries first, then go to issue number 0, and then into the ongoing series. I guess just because they wanted to make it confusing for everyone, because it really is kind of difficult to, I guess, follow the order that this stuff should be in, especially if you're going back and trying to do it 30 plus years later the way I am. And, you know, especially, you'll understand once we get into the story of this book, but this book could have happened before the Cyberforce miniseries or after, because the way that the story of this book plays out, it kind of just exists. It could have existed anywhere, and it would have made perfect sense. Art by Walter Simon. Plot by Mark and Eric Silvestri, Walter Simon. Script, Walter Simon. Letters, John Workman. Colors, Joe Chiodo. Editors, Mark Silvestri, Cynthia Sullivan. The story starts out with the members of Cyberdata, aka the Shocks, desperately searching for some thing. It was never explained what exactly this thing that they're looking for really is, as we see Killjoy, Buzzcut, Megawatt, and Psychotron holding up this thing that's never explained in any way, saying at last. So assumedly it was really important for Cyberdata, but we don't know why. And there's also a brand new face that we see down here in the bottom right-hand corner. However, the perceived success of their mission is short-lived when none other than Cyberforce breaks into wherever the heck they're supposed to be to thwart their evil plot to steal whatever the heck this thing is. We see that Stryker starts barking orders immediately, stating that they can identify 4 of the Shocks present. However, there is someone that they don't recognize. He then tells Ripclaw and Heatwave to take the 2 on the right, and for Psyblade and Impact to take the 2 on the left, as they begin to prepare themselves for a fight with the Shocks. At this point, Ripclaw says that it doesn't matter who this mystery guy is as long as he stays still long enough for Impact to flatten him. The mystery man then introduces himself as Ace of Blades. I'll just let that sink in for a minute. Okay, and our old pal Ace here is absolutely no match whatsoever for Impact, who flattens him with one punch, knocking him unconscious, and the other Shocks then just decide to not continue the fight whatsoever, as we see Killjoy, Psychotron, and Megawatt all pull the pins on some grenades and toss them at Cyberforce. Psychotron does actually say, hey, what should we do about Ace? And Megawatt says, screw him, he didn't make the cut. As all of their grenades bounce off the ground, Stryker wastes no time in telling everybody to get out of here. It's about to go boom. And he immediately grabs Ace's unconscious body and makes his way out of the facility, trying to avoid the explosion and save Ace's life in the process. We then see a massive explosion and the Shocks of Cyberdata escaping in some sort of assault helicopter, and then Stryker curses, stating that they got away empty-handed, but they did still get away. And again, we have no idea what exactly it was that they were trying to steal or why it was important, but there's a destroyed facility somewhere now and a unconscious body that the Cyberforce team now has to deal with. Later on, at a nearby hospital, we see Stryker and the mysterious Ace of Blades coming out of anesthesia. Stryker asks how he's feeling, and He says not too bad, and Stryker introduces himself. However, Ace states that he knows exactly who Stryker is and that the intel he received at Cyberdata stated that they were supposed to be wary of him in particular. Stryker says that he's flattered that Cyberdata is so concerned with him, but then wants to make sure that Ace really is all right. And Ace states that while he does have a splitting headache, he actually feels better than he has in weeks, which is kind of surprising given that he was literally knocked out cold by a punch to the jaw from impact and then narrowly escaped being blown up by grenades. At this point, Dr. Corbin enters the room, introduces himself, and explains to Ace exactly why it is he feels so much better, as he presents a small chip and tells him that this is a brain box that he extracted from the inside of Ace's skull. And then he tells Stryker to kind of give him the inside scoop and explain what all this means. So Stryker begins to tell him of a story from not too distant in the past, but about 8 years prior, of when he and the rest of the members of Cyber Force were working with the Shocks for Cyberdata. He tells Ace that they were hired to take out a drug lord who was trying to orchestrate a really big deal in the Washington area, and that the team was supposed to just neutralize everybody involved. But that was where some things started to go haywire, and they learned some new stuff about what was going on with Cyberdata and the Shocks program. The team then jumps into action, catching them all off guard as the drug kingpin known as Blackfist. I don't know why they state his name, because as far as I know, he's never brought up again, and this is the only time we're ever going to see him, but okay, his name is Blackfist, is shocked when he sees them. They all hit the ground, unloading on the drug kingpins, taking them both out, and then having to deal with the heavily armored mutant bodyguards that were there to protect them. However, the bodyguards, while physically imposing and rather powerful and well-armed, they're not exactly well-trained, so the shock troops quickly overwhelm them. We see Heatwave completely frying one of them as Stryker unloads his pistols. However, before they can take out the last one, he turns, takes aim, and gets off a few shots on Stryker and hits his target. Now, Stryker tells in his narration to Ace that the mutant bodyguard wasn't, terribly professional and seemed a little green and was rather shaky. So while he did happen to hit Stryker, he didn't hit anything vital. However, the impact of the shot was enough to knock Stryker out of a window on the 3rd story, dropping him all the way to the pavement below. The fall was rather life-threatening as it ended up fracturing Stryker's skull on impact, so he was rushed to the nearby William Casey Memorial Hospital, which happened to be the only nearby facility that could handle someone with all of his cybernetic implants. When he arrives, Dr. Corbin states that they need to operate immediately as he's going to be dead within minutes if they don't. One of the other men does protest, stating that Dr. Herzog is the only one who's authorized by Cyberdata to work on any of the shocks, but thankfully, Dr. Corbin insists and states that they have to save this man's life now. As they get into the operating room and Dr. Corbin begins to work on reconstructing Stryker's skull, he comes across the small chip that we saw earlier called the brain box, the same type of chip that he took out of Ace. He realizes that this is something that isn't on the schematics and he was not aware was inside of Stryker's skull, so he quickly takes time to distract the other doctors and nurses in the operating room, stating, "Oh, is that Dr. Herzog at the door?" They turn, all stating no, but he uses that moment of distraction to quickly conceal the brain box on his person and close up the wound. After the operation, he states that he's rather tired and headed home. The nurse asks, well, what about Dr. Herzog? He's going to want like a debriefing on all of this, but Corbin states it's not that big of a deal. I'll deal with him in the morning. As Herzog arrives, he realizes that Stryker's been operated on without him being present and is infuriated. He demands answers to be given to him immediately, and one of the other doctors and the nurse explain to him what was happening and that Dr. Corbin has already left for the day, even though Dr. Herzog wants to speak with him. However, they do bring up the fact that Corbin seemed to be in a hurry when he left and even forgot his briefcase when he walked out of the door. This is something that Herzog finds rather somewhat disturbing and a little bit odd, as he seems to believe that something needs to be looked into and that a lot of these puzzle pieces aren't exactly going together the way they should. We then see Dr. Corbin exiting the building thinking, oh, I forgot my briefcase. That's going to look a little bit suspicious. However, what I'd like to bring up is that Dr. Herzog only missed Dr. Corbin by like 2 minutes. In fact, he hasn't even left the facility's grounds. He's literally right outside. They could have sent someone after him to, track him down and be like, hey, don't leave yet. Dr. Herzog wants to have a word with you. As Corbin begins to make his way towards the parking lot, he looks over inside of a caged off part of the outer grounds and sees that there's a training exercise going on between Heatwave and none other than Warblade from Wildcats. Now, we find out that Warblade was in fact a member of the Shocks and also most likely got all of his cybernetic implants from Cyberdata. The interesting part being, though, that Warblade, unlike the rest of the members of the Shocks, is not a mutant. Remember, he is a human-alien hybrid. However, Dr. Corbin notices that Heatwave is acting incredibly aggressive during this training session and is going way over the line in terms of how violent and hard he's pushing Warblade, who he notices is not acting like his normal self and seems to be reacting very slowly and not fighting back in a way in which he can protect himself. Realizing that things are getting out of hand way too fast, Corbin runs out and grabs Heatwave, screaming, "Stop, you're going to kill him." And Heatwave realizes that he was completely out of control, stating, "I was so angry, Warblade, are you okay?" Warblade states that he was, but that it's a good thing that Dr. Corbin intervened. Off to the side, Psychotron leans over to Misery and says, "That was you, wasn't it? You were interfering with Warblade's abilities to react so that, he wouldn't be able to fight back as effectively." Misery states that she wanted to see exactly how far Heatwave would take things, and that she doesn't believe that Warblade is really working out too well with the team anyways, and she thinks that that new Indian mutant is going to be a much better fit for the team. Of course, she's speaking about Ripclaw, who, by the way, is not going to appear throughout the rest of this issue. As they continue to walk off, Psychotron warns Misery, stating, "I wouldn't mess around with Cyberdata's property if I were you, because if they catch wind of this and decide they don't like it, they're going to do more than just make you retire, if you catch my drift." However, Misery doesn't seem to be too worried, as she states that she's far too valuable to Cyberdata to be cast away so frivolously. Meanwhile, Dr. Corbin takes Cyblade aside and says, "Have you noticed how different Heatwave seems to be acting now than when he first got here? And how he seems more violent and more quick to anger than he did before?" Cyblade states, "I don't know what this has to do with me. I've been given all these cybernetic implants and I feel the same as when I got here." However, Corbin reminds her that she's actually pretty new and that so many of the other Shocks seem to be far more, violent and unforgiving than she is. And that if she wants to talk more about this and try and see if they can figure out why exactly that is, that she should meet him in the lab or in the computer lab a week from today. Now, this entire interaction has been witnessed by Dr. Herzog, who wonders exactly why it is Dr. Corbin is taking Cyblade aside and having a chat with her. Once again, this is completely re-emphasizing my point that Dr. Corbin is not that far away. They literally could have stopped him. Heck, Dr. Herzog at this point has had enough time that he could have hopped in the elevator and gone downstairs and cut Dr. Corbin off before he left the facility to have his chat with him. We then get more narration from Stryker, who explains to Ace that they met up with Dr. Corbin, he and Cyblade that is, to get more information in the computer lab. They were also joined by one John McNally and his young son Chip. Now, of course, this is the same Chip that we met during the Cyberforce miniseries. However, he's 8 years older in that series, but still a super genius, even now as a child. So Chip is brought along because he can easily hack into Cyberdata's systems, and when he does so, he finds a video confirming the fears that Dr. Corbin had, as he shows a video of Stryker pulling a gun on a man, putting it in his face, and pulling the trigger. However, Stryker says that he doesn't recognize this man or remember this ever happening, but that's because, as Dr. Corbin explains, this is actually a brainwashing program that was part of the chip that was inserted into him, and that all of the Shock members have this, and this is how Cyberdata is controlling their minds and making them more violent, and also, trying to make them apparently better at carrying out their missions without any type of remorse or hesitation. Cyblade says that she doesn't seem to recall ever having any of these feelings, but they find out that's because she has not received her implant yet and is actually scheduled to receive it the very next day. Cyblade is actually rather worried when she finds this out and believes that things are not exactly what she was told they were going to be, and wonders exactly what Cyberdata is actually up to. However, before they can continue any more of their investigation, they hear a large stomping sound coming down the hallway, and John realizes that they've been discovered. At this point, Corbin says, "We've got to get out of here," and before they can make their retreat, the Cyberdata security force blasts through the wall, guns aimed at all of them, as they tell them to freeze and give themselves up. Corbin states to Cyblade, "They haven't seen you yet. Here, take this and get out of here." Cyblade asks what it is, and he explains that it's a defense against their treachery, which isn't exactly all that descriptive. Also, there's no way that coming from this door right here, this Shock team, or I shouldn't say Shock team, this security team broke in and didn't see Cyblade. They had to have seen her when they busted through the wall. Stryker tells Cyblade to run, he'll cover her as she jumps out through the window to make her escape. Once again, there's literally no way that the security team didn't see her, as we see one of them that Stryker is firing at is like right here next to the window. They had to have seen her before she made her escape. We then see more of security jumping in through a rooftop hatch, which would again be kind of weird because we saw how tall this building was earlier on. It's at least like 6 stories. So if they're coming in through the roof, that would mean that Cyblade is jumping out of a window on the 6th story of this building minimum. I don't know how on earth she's supposed to survive that, given that Stryker fell through a window from the 3rd story earlier in this, and he had a skull fracture and nearly died. But apparently she's better equipped to deal with those hard landings than he is. The security team states that they're instructed to take Stryker alive and to make sure to not kill him. And Stryker rebuttals by saying, "Well, I don't have any instructions not to kill you." However, one of the security members realizes that he can end this very quickly by simply grabbing Chip and putting a gun to his head, stating that they were never told that they had to keep the child alive. Stryker immediately gets what the security guard is inferring and drops all of his weapons. We then find out through Stryker's narration that several days later, the Shocks were instructed to take out another drug dealer with a team made up of Killjoy, Heatwave, Misery, Warblade, and Cyblade. Now, this creates another problem because we saw that Cyblade was scheduled to get her implant the very next day, and this is happening several days later, which would imply that she has received her implant, but she hasn't. This is just a huge mistake in the writing. As the team gets themselves ready, they then leap into action as Warblade says, "Didn't anyone tell you guys that drugs are bad for you?" One of the drug dealers screams no, more so of the fact that they've been found out, but Warblade rebuttals by stating, "Well, you know what, they are, and I'm even worse," as he grabs the drug dealer, and we then see Psyblade creating some sort of energy back here, Heatwave unleashing a blast, and Misery just kind of getting in position, I guess. She doesn't seem to be really entering the fight. However, this is where we learn that this was not actually a real drug deal, but was in fact a setup by the feds as a diversion to try and capture the shock force. We then see that Stormwatch was sent to apprehend all of the members of the team as Backlash leads the charge, grabbing Warblade with one of his energy lassos. We then see Flashpoint emerge and unleash a blast, causing an explosion in front of Killjoy and Misery. Misery asks who exactly these guys are, and Warblade responds by stating, "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," as he tries to create a diversion by slashing open a water pipe. He then tells Misery to cover their escape. She does so. However, she decides to do this by activating the Brainbox chip that's inside of Heatwave, which causes him to immediately start attacking Psyblade. Psyblade realizes that they've been betrayed, and she tries her best to try and avoid all of the attacks from Heatwave and reason with him, but she realizes that it's no use as he's completely under the control of the microchip. The other team members of the Shocks decide to get into their helicopter and make a steady retreat, leaving Heatwave and Psyblade behind. Nautica, however, realizes that something is not right as she diverts the water coming out of the broken pipe and uses it to take Heatwave off of his feet. At this point, given the chance to use the opening, Psyblade pulls out the device that was given to her by Dr. Corbin and activates it, hoping that this is exactly what he meant when he said that this would be able to defeat Cyberdata's treachery. Upon pressing the button and activating the device, Heatwave immediately reverts back to his normal self. However, he has no idea what was going on. At this point, Psyblade decides to come to him, telling him that they've been apprehended, but the members of Stormwatch don't seem to be all that concerned about bringing the two of them in and realize that something strange has happened and that perhaps the shock force or shock troop force wasn't all they thought it was. We then come to an advertisement for the Cyberforce trade paperback. This, of course, is a collected paperback of the entire Cyberforce miniseries with an all-new holofoil cover. Look out! Now, if you have yet to watch my videos on the original Cyberforce miniseries, you can find all of them in my Cyberforce playlist. Getting back to the story, we continue to see some of Stryker's narration as he continues with his telling of this story to Ace, and he explains that they were brought to a barge that was actually a secret Cyberdata facility and also a bit of a prison to keep them locked up in, as we see Stryker, John, Chip, and Dr. Corbin all bound in some cells in the lower parts of the barge. We then find out that Stryker is incapable of breaking free of his bindings as they're actually emitting a signal to deactivate his cybernetics. We then find out that it's none other than Kamada who is in charge of this facility, and that they are going to actually kill everyone but Chip because they believe that it's too late for any of the brainwashing to work with the rest of them, but that Chip shows real promise given that he's a supercomputer genius at such a young age, and they believe that they can use him to their advantage. We then find out that Kamada is in fact speaking to none other than Zadrock over a video screen, and Zadrock tells him that he believes that this is a good plan and that he wants all of them brought before him, however, before the termination, as he has a bit of a message that he wants to convey to Stryker, Corbin, and John. As the four of them are being led to Kamada's office by a security team, the entire roof gets blown off of the ship, apparently, or at least the top deck. I don't know what part of the ship they're supposed to be in at this point because there's no backgrounds here. And there's been no backgrounds in a lot of panels in this book, which those of you who've been watching for a while know is something that really bugs me. But we see that Heatwave and Psyblade have joined up with the members of Stormwatch to rescue their friends as they just unleash hell when they enter, just blasting security team members. And Stryker, using this diversion to his advantage, grabs one of these security team members, snaps his neck, and takes his guns. As the alarms go off, Kamada decides that the jig is up and that he needs to make a steady retreat as we see him quickly jump through a nearby escape hatch to get away. The Cyber Force team then wastes no time in just taking the fight directly to all of the security agents, actually taking them out faster than the Stormwatch team can even react, as we overhear Flashpoint stating, wow, they're really angry, and Nautica being very impressed at how efficiently they work as a team, to the point that the Stormwatch team seems to be almost unnecessary at this point. And we then find that Stryker says, yeah, this whole teamwork thing does sound like a good idea. However, he then realizes that he hears a boat leaving the barge that they're all on and realizes that they probably need to get out of here as quickly as possible. We then see that after the team escapes, the barge explodes, as apparently there was some sort of self-destruct mechanism in place on it, and the team then swims to shore. However, they are one member short, as John apparently drowned or was blown up, one of the two, and he left Chip an orphan. As the team makes their way to the pier, they all get out of the water, with Chip screaming for his father, as the young child is now distraught at the loss of one of his parents. It is, however, a little bit weird, not even weird, just poor writing in my opinion, that Stormwatch just immediately is like, oh, you guys were brainwashed? Cool, you can come, we'll help you. Like, really? Like that? You're just going to immediately take their explanation that, everything's okay, they're not, trying to fool you or anything. Just, yep, you guys were brainwashed. That's enough of a story and explanation for us. We'll join you and help you storm this boat now and kill a bunch of people. Like, really? It's just, I mean, come on, man. Like, within a single page, this is what we got to. Fine. We're then taken back to the hospital in the present as Stryker continues to explain to Ace that Chip's father did drown and that Chip took it pretty hard, but he eventually handled it. He then explains that there was nothing actually connecting the ship to cyber data and that the feds couldn't do a whole lot. He also then tells him that the members of Cyber Force didn't really want to get too deep into their explanation with the feds because they didn't want any of them looking into their past with cyber data. And so that's how cyber data has remained basically untouched for the last 8 years. At this point, Ace asks about the brain box in his head, and Stryker tells him it's an updated model and that if Dr. Corbin had not been able to remove it when he did, that cyber data would have actually used it to fry Ace's brain remotely. At this point, Ace says, you know what? From now on, just call me Jamie. I think I'm done with this whole Ace thing. And once I get this mess cleaned up, I'm going to get a day job. A 9 to 5 sounds pretty good, and so does a little house in the burbs. Stryker realizes that Ace, aka Jamie, has decided that this isn't the life for him and that he wants to live a more normal day-to-day than any of them have chosen to live. And he actually wishes Jamie luck and tells him to, keep his head up and work hard. As Stryker exits the hospital and starts to walk through the parking lot, he starts to wonder to himself if Jamie has the right idea and thinks about how, they've really put a hurt on cyber data and that perhaps at this point their Cyberforce team is unnecessary and that maybe he should have, a little house in the burbs and live a more quiet life. However, he's interrupted in this thought process when there's a huge explosion that blows up half the hospital. He is thrown through the air and states, oh my God, a chopper. I didn't even hear it coming. And then he looks up to see the chopper that we saw earlier in his flashback, obviously a cyber data vehicle, making a swift escape. Stryker, realizing that the hospital's been blown up and that Jamie's dead, thinks to himself, I've got to stop this now, as he pulls out one of his guns, takes aim, and unleashes a shot. We see the chopper flying away as Stryker's gun is smoking, and the chopper gets smaller in the distance. And then apparently, as the shot connects with one round from a pistol, the entire helicopter just explodes. Maybe it was some kind of special round. Maybe Stryker hit one of the bombs that was on the chopper. We don't know. He then states, "Curtains, that one's for you, Jamie. I'm sorry I couldn't have saved you." He then reaches down and picks up Jamie's brain box from the rubble, which conveniently landed right next to him, and states, "I'm going to hold on to this, and I'm not going to forget you. You remind me of just how much there is left to do, and just how much I love my work," as he starts to walk off and just leaves the smoldering rubble and the scene of this huge explosion that happened at the hospital. Is Dr. Corbin alive? Is he okay? We don't know. Also, if Cyberdata was trying to hide their dealings from the US federal government, it seems like maybe blowing up a hospital isn't exactly the best way to lay low. The way that they end this story is so stupid, man. I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. I can't get over how bad of an ending this is. We then move on to an advertisement for Codename Strikeforce. If you'd like to learn more about Codename Strikeforce, you can check out my video on Codename Strikeforce #1. On the final page of the book, we get an advertisement for Bow and Board, where you could order original art by Mark Silvestri, Dale Keown, and Brandon Peterson. I've never spoken to anyone who ever used this service. If you did, feel free to talk about it in the comments below. I'd like to know more about it and what your experiences ordering anything from Bow and Board might have been. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the Cyberforce Wildcats crossover Killer Instinct, featuring both Ripclaw and Warblade. And that was Cyberforce #0. And if I'm being quite honest, I think it stinks. It's not that good of an issue. And this is coming from someone who really likes Cyberforce. I honestly didn't care for this issue at all. Walter Simonson's artwork is okay, but it's not nearly as good as Mark Silvestri's, not in my opinion. And the whole overall plot of this story just isn't that good. There's weird plot holes in places. The ending is awful. The whole idea that Cyberdata is operating in the shadows, but then just blowing up hospitals in the middle of cities doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The whole thing with Ace and, explaining the brainwashing tech that Cyberdata uses, okay, fine. But again, like I said, this could have been explained anywhere, and I don't even think it really needed a dedicated issue. You could have slowly drip-fed this realization to us, the reader, throughout multiple issues going later into the series. Introducing the character of Ace of Blades was completely unnecessary, and we're supposed to believe like Stryker was just going to walk away from everything, and it's like, okay, but what about Strikeforce, like his mercenary group that he has on the side that they advertise in this very issue, where he has a whole nother team that he makes lots and lots of money with, doing the exact same type of work that he does with Cyberforce. We're just supposed to believe that, Stryker was going to just, I don't know, get some kind of day job or something, or start, investing in like mutual funds. Like what was going on? What were we supposed to believe? Like, again, I just think that this thing was just poorly slapped together for some sort of bridge from the miniseries to the ongoing series, but I don't feel like it was necessary in any way. But then again, these are just my opinions. You might think that this was a terrific issue and that the artwork was amazing and that the story made perfect sense. And if that's the case, well, it's okay, because everybody's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.